All right, let's do this. Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for tuning in for the first Statsig webinar of 2025. I'm Sid from the product marketing team, and we have an awesome topic today on how do you report A/B test results. I have to say, Allon, your marketing guy does such a good job with coming up with these titles. Really gives me a run for my money. But I think it's awesome that everyone at Statsig, and I think even our audience really appreciates these titles that you come up with. We did one couple of months ago on sequential testing, which was titled "Test in the City." And today the one on A/B tests, reporting A/B tests is titled "Dude, Where's My Impact?" So some cool pop culture references there. So it's pretty interesting that today we're choosing a topic which is more on, I think a side of A/B testing that doesn't get spoken about enough. Like in the past, we've spoken about, more on statistical methodologies and testing techniques. But I'm really excited about this one because I think this is a topic that there's not a lot of material out there. So before we get started, I'd love for our presenters, Allon and Tim, to give a quick intro about themselves and their background, and then we can jump straight in. So Allon, do you want to go first and give a quick intro?
Yeah, thank you, Sid. Hi, I'm Allon. I'm based in Tel Aviv, Israel. I'm a statistician. Been working in the high-tech industry for the last 10 years or so. Last role was I was the statistician of Wix.com. I was in charge on all the internal platform of A/B testing. This is how I got really familiar with A/B testing in general. And in the last 3 years, I founded and I'm the CEO of Bell, which is a company that gives services in A/B testing, MMM, and geo experiments.
Awesome. And Tim?
Hi everyone, I'm Tim. I lead the data team here at Statsig, head of data. My background is I spent 5 years at Meta, where I saw where I was part of the experimentation culture that they're famous for. I worked on many experiments where the results, in terms of reporting, went straight to VPs. And now currently at Statsig for the last 4 years, I worked with our customers, guiding them on best practices on how to set up experiments, but also learning a lot from them as they're across a wide variety of different sizes, different cultures, and different industries. And I just want to throw that the reference for the title of this webinar, Dude, Where's My Impact? It's based on a movie. I greatly enjoyed that movie when I first watched it. I think I saw it maybe 3 years ago, and it does not hold up for me.
That's awesome. I mean, I think today we're all going to be asking the question, like, and searching for that impact over the next 40 minutes. So hopefully this is as entertaining as the movie. I just dropped a message. I know someone asked on, just whether this session would be recorded. So yes, we are recording the session and we'll send this to you in a couple of days. Also, I know we have a ton of people, almost 80 odd people joining us today. So take a moment to let us know on the webinar chat where you're joining us from. I know Tim and I are based in Seattle, Washington. Allon is joining us from Tel Aviv. So I think this is truly like a pretty global webinar that we have today. Nice. I see like India, I see New York City, Cambridge, UK, France, Stockholm, Germany, Boulder. Wow, Russia,
Oh, wow.
Chicago. That's so awesome to see. Nice. Thank you all for joining us, and let's jump straight in. So as I said, we don't talk much about the aspect of post-experiment analysis, readout, reporting. So Allon, can you get things started by telling us why do you think reporting is often the most overlooked yet critical step in the A/B testing process?
Yeah, thanks, Sid. I'll start with explaining why it is overlooked, and then I'll get to why I think it's really crucial to do so. Well, the first reason I think is just the last phase in the A/B testing process. So you do all the design, you do all the analysis, you have everything, and then you need to get going to the next mission or the next task that you have. So I guess in many cases, you just want to just write it down and send it to whoever needs to get it to get going with the rest of the things that you have on your day. But the second reason, which I think is more important and more has more weight, is that we usually we want to make things simple and certain. It is much easier to say we have an uplift, or we expect to see, I don't know, 6% difference or increase in some kind of a metric, it is much easier than to start saying about the uncertainty or to report confidence interval. So we usually want to communicate and to consume the data of the A/B test in terms of winning or losing, green or red or gray. It is much easier than giving a more complex, I would say, picture of the reality. Oh, and so this is why I think it is really important is that well, at the end of the day, this is what people consume. So I think that the risk that you have when you don't communicate the result well is that people can lose trust in the process, in the procedure, and you don't want to get there because then you might start doing less tests and counting more on intuition. And like as a company, as a data-driven culture, you don't want to get there.
And Tim, so from your perspective, how does a well-reported A/B test then drive better decisions within an organization? Just based on your experience working with Statsig customers, but also what you've seen in the past at like companies like Meta.
Yeah, I'll echo what Allon's said, and it's like simplicity and really being clear in that report is super critical. What I've seen in terms of good reporting is that a report is the output of an experiment, and it's really like you've done a lot of due diligence. You've been very careful with like making sure that we have a clear hypothesis, what the metrics we need to report on. Like there's a lot of work that's done, and that should be reflected in the report. And because it gives you the context, it actually frames the decision making. Because you'll look at the report and it keeps the discussion and the debate over those results really focused on like what exactly we were looking for and what our expectations were at the beginning. And highlights like if folks want to challenge whether it was run properly or stuff or not, like that sort of information is in there. But I think the second thing a report does that's really important is like it's got all the context in there so that if you were to look at this experiment 6 months from now, a year from now, over like, hey, why did we make this decision? Or hey, someone told me we've run something similar like this in the past. Let me see what happened. It gives you all of that in there. So like a good report helps you drive to a final decision, but it's also a good reference for afterwards in terms of like building learnings in your org.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to that. I remember a few years ago, even as like when I was doing an internship at Adobe, one of the first things that my manager gave me when I joined was a few artifacts which were A/B tests that they ran like 6 or 12 months ago, and like that was so helpful in like for me to like gain some context and like understand what get a lot of insights and understand like what's working and what isn't. So Allon, you spoke a bit about, creating that trust in the process itself. And you've written a bit about this in our blog, and you've spoken about this in different forums. Can you help us understand what are the risks of overstating certainty in A/B test results, and how can analysts effectively communicate that uncertainty to non-technical stakeholders?
Yeah, sure. Let's start, I say, by just saying what does it mean to overstate certainty? So usually it means that you have you do a test, you sample the data, you split the data to A and B. Then you have usually the goal metric, the metric that you are really interested in. You want to increase it. And you see some kind of a lift, some kind of a difference. Let's say that this difference is statistical significant. So just for the sake of the example, we have an 8% difference. So the most natural thing to do when you report, consume, even analyze the result is to say, we see an 8% difference. And you will report the stakeholders that this is the difference that you see. And usually if this is the difference that you believe the true effect there is between the two variants. So what happened is that all the company, this is usually what people do. And what happens is that everyone expect to have an 8% difference. They will expect to have an 8% increase in the metric. Now, Now, and when they don't see that, then you start to have trust issues. You think maybe the infrastructure is not well, maybe the data is not well, but it might be there's a chance that everything goes well. You have the great infrastructure, you did everything right, but when you report 80%, 8%, and people expect that to see, they need to understand that you have the uncertainty, and uncertainty comes from two things. First of all, when we say that we are confident, or when we can say for almost 100% certainty that the effect is not going to be exactly 8%. It is going to be with some kind of confidence, usually 90 or 95%, from a lower bound to an upper bound. So confident interval, and we will get there later, but they give a much better information about how certain you are. What do you think is going to be the true effect? Where do you think the true effect lies in? And we need to understand that even this confidence, even the confidence interval, which gives you a range between, let's say, 6% to 10% difference, even this is not 100% guaranteed. We say that only with 90 or 95% confidence. So there's also a small percentage of chance, but it is higher than 0%, that the effect is going to be even different from that. It could be lower, it could be higher, but in most cases it's going to be lower. And when you report that, when you communicate that, then people's expectations are much less I don't know, focused on the observed lift, on the the specific 8%, and they understand that it could vary from different values.
Yeah, and one of our attendees, Andy, is actually sort of building on what you said, to say that you want to make sure that future teams who are looking at these reports and results in the future don't try the same thing without knowing with that sort of understanding the risks and uncertainty in the prior results. So good point there from one of our attendees. And just reiterating that, we want to take we see a lot of questions coming in already, and we will set aside some time at the end to sort of have Allon and Tim answer that. But I want to turn to Tim Tim, obviously you're head of data at Statsig. You've worked at Meta, where that was like probably one of the best in-house experimentation platforms, and now you're at Statsig, sort of like building that. How can such tools and platforms help analysts represent this uncertainty more effectively and communicate that to product stakeholders and other non-technical stakeholders?
Yeah, for me, like the number one value you get from a platform, an experimentation platform, is that you should be able to trust the numbers you see in there. And so I think, Allon covered a lot of like, how do you actually communicate a certain uncertainty in a number? And it's not entirely straightforward, but I actually feel like what you want to make sure is that you don't have other reasons to question that number that we do show. And so one way we can do this is through consistency. For example, you should make sure that if you have results across multiple experiments, that you're actually using the same confidence intervals. You're actually using the same metric definition. If you're seeing a lift in revenue of 2%, if one team's reporting a lift in revenue of 2%, another one's reporting a lift in 1%, it gets more confusing and more uncertain if it turns out that those two teams are using different revenue metrics. And so I think that's where the benefits of a platform can really come in, to make sure that when you're looking at experiments from one team and looking at results from one team to another team, that you're actually comparing apples to apples. And so a good platform to me has things like experimental governance and being able to implement standards so that it's very clear what folks are looking at. I think another sort of part for making sure that the results are trustworthy is that it needs to be trustworthy across the whole spectrum of different levels of statistical savviness. And I know we're getting into the topic of what is actually a confidence interval means, but its essence, folks should be able to intuitively understand that these results have some amount of uncertainty in them, and then you should have some confidence of like, do I actually see what I need to see to confidently make a decision? And a lot of that is done through a great UI. Our UI is heavily inspired by Facebook's legendary Deltoid platform, and that is where we sort of highlight things that are statistically interesting. Things immediately your eye goes to things that you should be looking closer at, and helps you parse a wide variety of different results right away. We also, by the way, I do want to call out that for like statisticians, folks who don't know statistics will want to be like, just tell me what I need to know. But then folks who do know statistics will want to go and see the underlying numbers and stats. So we've done a few UI tricks where you can easily unfold that information through a system we call progressive disclosure of complexity. And so things like hover cards, tooltips, menu items, and tabs are things we use liberally to allow folks who are like, listen, I don't know how you got that number. Show me where it came from. Like that, and show me the underlying stats, show me the raw standard deviations of the different groups. All that stuff is available in our UI to sort of help build trust in order to understand where that uncertainty came from.
Yeah, it sounds like for like the typical reader of the experiment results, like, they get to see what they want. And then for those who want to double click into like an alpha or a confidence interval, and Allon, we'll get into that in just a moment. But then it's helpful for the data science or statisticians to go deeper into that. So we touched upon the idea of confidence intervals a couple of times already. But I think this is a topic that's quite misunderstood. Just generally not something that everyone grasps. And there's obviously different ideas like p-values, alpha, confidence intervals. So Alone, from a test report standpoint, can you clarify what is the proper interpretation of the confidence interval and how best to communicate that in a report?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I think that the thing that Tim just said earlier, I think it is the most important point. So I think that being able to visualize confidence interval and helping folks just consume easily the difference and the certainty using the colors and the width of the confidence interval, I think this is the most important issue. What I'm going to do now is a bit of statistical nuance, or just trying to clarify what is the exact definition. I think it is important only for the people who really, really, really do care. It's not, but what Tim says is the most important thing. Let's first say how people usually, when they look at confidence interval, how they interpret them and what they think they are. So let's say we have an observed lift of 8%, and the confidence interval is somewhere between 6 to 10%. Usually, when you show someone a confidence interval, the intuition to interpret it is that the true effect lies somewhere between 6% to 8%. And it lies with 95% probability. This is false. I think it's not a really bad mistake to do so. But if you ask my professor, probably he'll say otherwise. But it's not true to attribute probability to the true effect being somewhere in the confidence interval. And I'm going to try with an example. I hope it is correct to explain why it's so. It's the first time I'm going to try the example, so you give me feedback later. Let's say that I have a coin, and I'm going to put the coin on the table with heads up. What is the probability that heads is up? The probability is 1%, right? So because the coin is on the table, heads up, it's 1%. Let's say I cover the coin with my hand. What is the probability that heads is up? The probability is still 1%. I covered the coin with my hand, but probability is still 1, it's still 100%. Now, let's assume that I'm about to toss the coin. If I toss the coin, the probability I'm going to have heads up is 50% because I did not toss the coin yet. Now I'm going to give the last scenario. I'm going to toss the coin. I tossed the coin. It fell over the table and it is head up. Probability heads up is 100%. If I cover my hand, it's not going to change anything. Now I'm going to try to explain how it relates to confidence interval. The probability of 95% is about the procedure, is about tossing the coin. Once you created a confidence interval, the coin was already tossed. And we say we don't know what is the true effect. But we know that it will be with probability 1 or probability 0 inside the confidence interval. So if you think about constructing a confidence interval, when it is already constructed, so the true effect, it contains the true effect with probability 0 or 1. It's a bit confusing because we don't know if it is 0 or not or 1. But this is how we treat the confidence interval. The probability is only about the procedure, is about tossing the coin. So usually what we will say about confidence interval is that we are 95% confident. Most people don't really care if we are 95% confident or if we'll say there is 95% probability. But this is like the difference that we statisticians do. So if you want to report confidence interval in the proper way, you should say something like, well, there is an observed lift of 8%, okay? Observed lift. This is not the real effect. And we say with 95% confidence, or you can report the confidence interval and say that we are 95% confident that the true effect lies somewhere between the lower bound and the upper bound when you report like 6% or 10%. But as I said before, this is not crucial. The most crucial thing is to understand the width, which tells you how much you are confident. But for those that are really interested, I think this will give like a good explanation of what is the proper way, statistically way to say what is the confidence interval.
Nice. Thanks for laying that out, Allon. That was a good explanation. Tim, anything you'd like to add there, or anything from an A/B testing, like just the reporting standpoint, you'd like to add there, or any hot takes on that?
No, I'm really impressed how Allon executed that explanation. But I think he's absolutely right. It's actually there is a statistical definition, and and the problem is like a lot of debates get into that definition, whereas it actually you're right, the width actually matters far more in order to get some sense. Yeah.
Nice. Coming to the next next part of this webinar. So when we're generalizing A/B test results, what are some of the key external factors that an analyst should consider to avoid misleading conclusions? Allon, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, what are what? Can you just repeat the question, please?
The question was more around what are the external factors that analysts should consider to avoid misleading conclusions when generalizing test results.
Yeah, sure. Well, just before I'll say that, I think we are talking about all the challenges or how difficult is it to report, but it is, I think, still important to say that A/B testing is the golden standard to understand causality of or to understand the effect that you have for some kind of treatment. So all other methods which are super valid, all the causal inference method to try to understand an effect or the causal of some kind of a treatment, they are having a much harder time. But it's good that we are doing all these conversation discussion, but it is also important to understand that it is it's the golden standard today to understand causality. So I think that again, it is the naive approach. It is really understandable that you have you have the test result, even if you report the confidence interval, there is a chance that you're not going to see the effect that you saw in the A/B test. And one of the reasons is that you have some kind of external factors. It could be, for example, I don't know, a change in the marketing, in the traffic. Maybe, I don't know, marketing team are changing their campaigns. So you're going to have a difference of the population is going to be a difference. It could be seasonality. Maybe the test was conducted in a specific time of the year. So you need to be very cautious about it and also to report to understand that maybe this specific test does not represent the whole the population in the current situation, or maybe the future population is going to change.
Yeah. And Tim, like this is probably a thing you've had to deal with when working with customers at Statsig. Like, can you chat a bit about like how, you've approached this in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I have some experience. Like, I've worked on a lot of products where there's actually a big difference between short-term and long-term effects as well. So we call those novelty effects when it influences users just at the beginning of their experience. But what you actually care about is having long-term sustained impacts. Uh, so that way, like maybe I ran an experiment for 4 weeks. When I observe a certain lift, can I be confident that this is going to be sustained after we ship the experiment? These are the kind of things that are important to know. There's a few things we've done in Statsig to some tools that are some of the more popular ones among our customers. The first is we have a view called days since exposure. This is sort of where we align all the users based on their first start date. Usually in an experiment, you're constantly enrolling users in. So over the course of January, you may have some users that started last week and some users that may have started in the first week of January. We can actually align their day zero to see everybody's first reaction to this feature and how this metric evolves the longer and longer that user stays in the treatment or the control. And so to understand that, and that lets you understand the durability of results. You'll be able to know like did that lift completely, is it going to zero over some period of time, or is it actually sustained and upwards? So that's day since exposure view that we have. I've also seen that for some of the effects Allon was talking about, that you can have things like sales, you can have things like holidays, you can have things like weekly seasonality, such as weekdays versus weekends. And most of our customers have a weekday versus weekend effect. We actually do provide a calendar view where you can actually see a time series by calendar date over how those metrics are behaving. And you can actually, if you think that there's a day, hey, we had a logging outage, we can't really trust the data on that day, you can or hey, that was the day after Christmas, that's going to be a weird day, let's exclude that. You can actually exclude specific days from your results as long as those make sense. And those are apparent in the experimental readouts as well.
Nice. Like that those are good call outs for analysts to be, mindful of. Just coming to the last, couple of questions that we have prepared. Alon, so in your opinion, just summarizing everything that we've been calling out pitfalls and concerns that one should be wary of. But finally, when it comes to a well-structured A/B test report, what are the essential components that need to be in it? And do you have like an example that you can walk us through?
Yeah, so I actually went over the blog again, and we have some kind of a suggestion for how you should what should be the structure of an A/B test result. Well, I think in many cases it is relatively, I would say, obvious, but you want to start with the bottom line, right? So you want to be able to start with by just saying what you tried to test, what was the main KPI, what were the results. So and you want to report the result with the confidence interval. What was the decision that was made? And if you have, I don't know, between 1 to 3 things that you found interesting, some kind of a sub-segment, the analysis that you have, something that you think it is really important. Maybe you have a great idea to how you should test again if the test failed or so. But you want to have this part, the one on above, you want it to be relatively short with just a quick summary of the test, what you wanted to do, what happened, and what you're going to do next. Then I think you want to be able to visualize your primary KPI. You want to be able to report with some confidence interval. Basically, if you're using an external tool, if you have a good dashboard, you want to get a screenshot of that dashboard. If it visualize best the effect, the confidence interval, I think this is like the thing people will look first, will see first. And then you could maybe write something more about it. I think that I'm not 100% sure about is where you put the information about the test. Because sometimes in many cases, I saw people, I'm not sure how you do that in Statsig, but sometimes people give the information of the test above, which makes sense. Like what was the hypothesis, what the sample size, what was the test duration, and so it is important. It is like the basic details about the test, but I'm not sure if you want to consume them first. So I'm not sure where you want to put that, but you want to have them in the report. My opinion, like I tend to believe that you want to put them a bit lower, but not above. What I do think could be really nice, and I see very few companies do that, and I think that you do have that, it's Statsig, is that if you are able to see the two versions, if you have an image or a GIF of the two versions, I think this should be at top of the report as well, because that is much more, it gives you much more information than, I don't know, sample size, population, and so you just understand what would we wanted to test, and then you could see the confidence interval, you could see the real effect. So I would probably, if you do have the ability to visualize what was the effect, I would put that maybe below the bottom line, and then just before the primary KPI. Then the things that I will put later, but are still important, are the secondary KPIs. And if something there was really significant, you will probably want to mention that at the bottom line, at the top of the report. But if not, you still want to be able to present it so people will be able to see, to consume the data. And then you probably want to have some insight or future directions written there. It doesn't have to be about statistical significance, but just writing about ideas or things that you found interesting that may be worth exploring in future tests.
Tim, do you want to just address that quickly on like just from a static point of view?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like Allon alluded like here's the key parts of a report, and we have all of that in Statsig. What I've been really impressed with our customers, and by the way, thumbs up to you folks, is that they actually take full advantage of those features. Like they're actually putting in hypotheses, they're actually putting in screenshots of the test and control so that you have the full context, and your future self is going to be thanking you for really good documentation, and I'm pretty impressed that our customers are actually using that. We do have a very well-structured report, and it has all the parts that Allon alluded to. We don't have a lot of customizability today for like exactly reordering, but that's actually been a popular request and something which we are working on currently. So good call out on that.
Nice. So we talked about like, mistakes and pitfalls first, and now we're talking about, what are the key components in an A/B test report. I guess the final question and this is for you, Tim, is what happens after the report? So you've got a great report, people are reading it, consuming the insights. What does the post-experiment follow-up look like?
Yeah, anytime I see a great A/B test ran, particularly if there was like it's on a controversial topic, my favorite part as a data scientist is like the post follow-ups. You get a very clean readout, you get a very experimentally rigorous, statistically rigorous readout of like what you were trying to test, and you've made a decision collectively. It's got all the guardrails in place that you would expect from the statistics point of view. And I've heard the analogy, Lucas Vermeer calls that day science. Like, hey, we've got all the guardrails in place. But then he also talks about something he calls night science. And this is where it's like, okay, we've done the rigorous part, we've made the decision, but man, look at this data set we've got, and like we can actually poke and prod that further. And as a data scientist, you've probably, when you look at an experiment and you look at the results, you usually probably walk away with 3 or 5 more questions, and it's worth following up on those and be able to mine that data. Not for day science level like rigor and insights, but for like night science curiosity. And the cool thing about that is that some of the things you find, you can actually confirm those in follow-up experiments or use that to build new features. An example that I can think of is once we were trying to ship a feature at Facebook that we were deprecating a very critical technology for compliance and security reasons, and we knew this was going to be bad. Like our users are going to hate it, but this was going to happen regardless. We ran the experiment, and we actually found out that it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as we thought. Like about 60% of our users were we're willing to go down the harder compliance path and still complete it. But what we were able to, and so that feature was, I mean, the decision was we're going to ship it. But the neat thing is we're able to look at the 40% of users who didn't go through that and actually try to understand further, like what is actually going on here, and actually get some insights on what is the problem, what could we do to address that group of users. And so while we had 60% in the first experiment, we're actually able to, through a couple of iterative experiments, actually get that number up to 80% of maintaining user engagement. So I think that's a good insight over like you can find a lot of insights from an result that are outside of your primary hypothesis and use that to drive further improvements and future experiments.
Totally agree.
Yeah, love that anecdote. Thanks for sharing that, Tim. I know we have a ton of questions so we'll try to see how many we can get to in the next, 10 minutes or so. I really like this question from Nihal on after results communication, people often ask, how does this impact translate to the next 6 months or 1 year? How do you typically handle that? I know we briefly touched upon this in replicating, like with novelty effects and everything, but Allon or Tim, do you want to take this one from Nihal?
I can give a quick thing. So you're running a test. It'll have it's got some amount of statistical rigor, but it's got some sort of assumptions over like, hey, I ran this test for 1 month in February. How do I know it's going to be durable for a year? You don't know with 100% certainty, but it's your best guess with the data that you have. And I think it's important to sort of realize like there are limitations to what we can do, but at the same time, if you're taking a data-driven approach, that is the information you have. And unless you can find some obvious issues with it, that is what you sort of should default to believing.
Nice. A next question from Gregorius, and you can see this on the Q&A panel. How do you suggest to businesses when the result is not statistically significant, but the difference or the minimum detectable effect is desirable? That is, there is an uplift to key metrics. What do you do in such situations?
Yeah, I'll take that if that's okay. First of all, I say what I don't suggest you do is that you release the feature. So I don't, and I know it is really, really tempting because you say we have some kind of an evidence. It's not statistical significant. In Hebrew, we say azov oti, like leave me alone. Just let me release the feature. Stop. Don't bother me with all these statistics and significant things that you have. And I tell you why I think that the best thing to do is to reiterate. You can start a new experiment. That is one option. Second option is that you need to ask yourself, are you using the most advanced statistical methods? Are you using Cupid? Are you using sequential testing? Because if you're not, then maybe if you will use Cupid, if you will use the best statistical method, you might find a result significant. So this is also an important thing you need to ask yourself. And the last thing before, like if you don't want to iterate and if you did use the most advanced statistical method, a thing that I don't like, it's not recommended, but it is better than just releasing the feature, is to wait more time. So usually you set the sample size and you don't play that. Okay, if you decided that you need to have the test should run 4 weeks and you need to get to 40,000 users, then you don't continue. You want to analyze the results only once. But if you are using, for example, Statsig sequential testing method, then you can continue the test. There's no problem with that. So if you think that the result might be significant later, or you think that you have the right evidence, you could continue maybe further the experiment. In any way, I think that for data-driven culture, it is best to reiterate, try to make some kind of improvement, maybe wait longer, but not release the feature because you think that there's a slight positive evidence.
I just have like one thing to add because I deal with this question from customers all the time, like, hey, my results aren't statistically significant, what's wrong? And I always have to sort of like tell them news like it's always possible there is no effect. And they don't like hearing that, but like that is why we're testing. Yeah.
Yeah. Great questions. Moving on to the next one from Andre, who asks, how do you deal with team silos? Like any suggestions on how he asks like some weekly newsletters or QBRs, like what's the best way to sort of I guess the question is getting to like communicating and sharing out these results in a way that cross-functional teams can benefit from these insights from an A/B test.
Oh, I mean, I've seen this at Meta. Like there's every single team is running their own experimentation program. Um, Meta had a culture where it's very easy to share results through public communications. I mean, you would expect that from a social media company. Um, but yeah, you put results in. You can either summarize those. You can have links to some of the more further deep dives, and teams can actually learn from each other. So a good system of keywords, a good system of structuring reports, um, if the teams are using reports that are as identical as possible, so that's where a platform really can come into aid here, so that everyone's reporting things consistently. That makes it really easy to share this information.
Nice. I love the meta examples. I think they've obviously been like best in class at like doing experimentation. So it's nice to get those insights. We have a question from Antoine Tissier, and I think maybe Tim or Alon, do you want to take this? This is on our side. We always have to translate impact in yearly additional revenue because of OKRs of teams that are conducting experiments. Do you think it might be interesting to spend time to try to have some impact like winners curse, seasonality, or is it better to accept inaccuracy and to keep it as simple as possible? That's a good question.
I,
Tim,
I, the number one is like if you're keeping track of things cumulatively, like that's already, I think, part of the way there. If you can correct for the winner's curse, that's even better. Because otherwise you'll end up in a weird case where I've seen customers who say like, hey, we added up all of our wins, we got plus 40% to revenue last year. And then if they look at their bottom line,
yeah.
they're like, wait, but we only grew 5%. Like what's wrong? And that's quick way to lose trust in your experimentation program. So I think it helps to have some sort of correction, but I do give kudos to folks who are actually viewing things from a macro perspective.
I think that also those are really advanced questions. Like most of the clients, companies I work with, they don't document or really don't document well. Like asking how you could really communicate the result between teams. This is really advanced. So guys, really, you have a good culture if those are your current concerns.
Yeah. I like this next question from Dylan Lewis on what two carrots or sticks have worked to increase the quality of experiment summaries. So how do you sort of like drive, the quality is what he's getting to. He says teams write them for themselves and understand the need to document, but often don't or put in a Confluence page away from the experiment tool. I see you both laughing there. Tim, do you have anything to share for this question?
I mean, I have what I'll give the serious answer first. The what I've seen really work is when a really well-written report, you have a really good way to collaborate and share system. So whether you have some sort of like a document sharing system or a way to sort of announce results. Um, and the really well-crafted experiment summaries are the ones that people pick up and circulate. And if the creator of that is the one getting credit and other folks are seeing that internally, that is sort of like the carrot of like, oh wow, that person actually put a little bit of time into their experiment summary and they are getting like recognized even like 6 to 12 months later after the experiment is done. So I think that sort of like proves to people that like there is value in good documentation. But I've also seen, and this is where I get into a little bit of the silliness, where you can actually sort of promote this culture by doing things like giving out awards, giving out stickers. That sort of like little tricks may work depending on your company's culture. But I think like this sort of strikes to the heart of how does a company at a high level guide people to any sort of generic best practices? And that's obviously like pretty challenging. wherever you are.
Allon, any thought there? I think we may take just one final question.
Yeah, nothing to add. I think it was
Yeah.
well put.
Yeah. I mean, I see a lot of questions. So if there's any one that stands out to you guys, like we can take that. I like this one that Ashish has asked on how do you handle situations when multiple A/B tests are running concurrently? How do you avoid interference and accurately attribute results? And I know this is something that people have thoughts on. So do you want
That
to
could be a
take
great
this
topic for the next webinar,
next
maybe.
one? Let's lock it in. I think
You're
I
killing
think
me,
we
Sid.
should.
I this is like my pet peeve. I have a whole
Yeah.
blog post on this. That's actually probably one of my most number one read articles.
Oh,
I think I think as scientists, we sit there and think, oh my God, of course this experiment interacts with this one. In practice, it's very rare for that to happen. And I think as humans, we're sort of overestimating how worried we should be about this. And the price to worrying about this is your whole experimentation program slows down. You're either running experiments sequentially or you are dividing up your statistical power among 5 different experiments. And that's not a good trade-off. So uh, I'll leave it at that, but this is like potentially a good follow-up webinar.
great. I mean, I guess we know what we're hosting next month then. Um, Tim, if you have that blog handy, like it would be great if you can drop it on the chat because I think there's quite some appetite for folks to consume that information. I know there are so many great questions that unfortunately we don't have the time to get to. I don't know if Allon or Tim, if there's any one that you want to take, if you have a couple of minutes to stay on, any question on the Q&A that stands out to you that you'd like to speak to, we can. So
I don't mind staying a couple of minutes more. Yeah.
um, okay, I guess we can take this one from Alex. What's a great way to create an archive of reports so that similar A/B tests can be found in the future and be easily searched for? I guess especially when companies are running like hundreds of tests a year, it can become overwhelming over a couple of years. Do we maybe want to take that one before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. Like I don't have much to say about it because it is really a question. Like if you really have a really good experimentation program, then this is like the problem that you face. I think that in those kind of cases, I think that using a tool, like you don't want to build something by yourself. You want to use a Statsig, or if you have a documentation um, um, SaaS program like Notion or like Monday.com, they have all this search capabilities. So you'll be able to search tests by their name or by the description of the test. This is like the best answer I can think on top of my head.
Yeah, I think like a series like when we started Statsig, we were just getting people used to experimentation, getting people going. We're at the stage now where there are some companies, many customers who have hundreds of completed experiments, and now it's like, okay, that's like a good repository. We want to be able to search it. So having a good system of which team this experiment, having good categorization, having good metadata, is pretty critical. This is also an opportunity where I feel like AI can help you search that repository and find relevant results.
Yeah. Dylan Lewis says Confluence search is pretty good too. That so okay, so
Didn't
I
work yet? Yeah.
Dylan, get your own webinar.
Dylan's from Atlassian, folks, in case folks are
Okay.
wondering. Yeah. Okay, so that was a great webinar. Lot of great anecdotes. I think I would encourage our audience to check out the blog that Allon wrote, which kind of distills a lot of what was discussed today. It sounds like we already have desired topics coming for the next month's webinar. So hopefully we'll get that locked in soon. Thank you so much for participating. I think there were over 100 people who were in attendance.
From so many
Which was
places, which is super exciting, I would say.
Yeah, I think experimentation is truly like unifying the world, which is awesome to see. Um, yeah, we're divided by borders, but like unified by A/B tests, which is awesome. Uh, I think it was also really great to see a lot of folks, chime in with their own experiences. I wish we could have like shared everything out. So maybe there's a way for us to like, distill a lot of the insights that were coming in on the chat. I know people like Andy and others were chiming in from their own experiences at companies. So it might be perhaps the next step would also be to just consolidate everything that was discussed today and sort of like share that out in another blog. But thank you so much, Allon and Tim, for joining us today, and sharing a lot of amazing insights from your experiences. Um, any parting thoughts or hot takes before we wrap up?
I'm gonna remember A/B testing is uniting the world.
I mean, at the end of the day, like no matter where you are going to be a user in someone's A/B test. You're going to be a subject of some company's A/B test. And so
Every
that's what
day,
we all
every
have in
day.
common. That's what we
Yeah.
all have in common. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Let's do one again very soon.
Thank you
Thanks,
And
so much.
Sid. Good
yeah,
chatting with you, Alon.
yeah.
Ciao. Thank you so much, Tim.
Bye for now.